It's time for Booting Up, the show where we dive into bootcamp grad success stories to figure out how you can replicate their success and break into tech. Today, we're talking to a manager of product managers, someone that went through founding a company and has slowly risen up the ranks, starting with, untraditional path. So we're going to learn a lot from him today. If it's your first time here, make sure to hit the subscribe button and leave a like at the end if you learn something new. That'll help other bootcamp grads find this and help us, continue to get great guests like ours on the one today. So before anything else, let's just bring on Ryan. So Ryan, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing, Rod?
I'm doing good. Where are you joining us in from today?
Here in San Francisco.
San Fran. You guys didn't get frozen, right?
No, I was talking to some friends about it today. I actually went to CrossFit. It's outside, and it was warm enough that we were out just in our shorts working out. So definitely feeling for those who are over in, say, Texas that are having a real hard time right now. So wish there's something more that we could do for them.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Like I talked to someone in Texas and they're like, yeah, like I talked to them like a few days ago and they're like, yeah, it's about to snow. And I'm like, are you serious? I thought like Texas and Florida, I thought we were always good. But
it's wild. Yeah,
it's crazy. But you grew up in an environment where there was no sort of snow even on the forecast ever, right? You grew up in Hawaii.
Yeah, grew up over in Hawaii. There is one of the volcanoes on the Big Island that somehow gets a little bit of snow and people try to ski it just for entertainment. But it's pretty much same season all year round, and which is great in terms of from a perspective of sports, but certainly miss out a little bit on the seasons. And after that, ended up actually on the East Coast. So got plenty of snow and some serious heat over there, which was great.
Yeah, no, but that must have been a shock. Like you go from islands and then you went to school in Babson, which is Boston.
Yeah, right outside of Boston. It was actually funny. I think the first snowstorm, my roommate is also from Hawaii, and I think we were the only two that were actually out in it because we were so excited to see all the snow and play around in it. And everyone was grumbling about it and having to run to class, and we just would have snowball fights and play around in the snow because it was great. Because in Hawaii you don't get that, and so it was definitely really exciting for us.
Yeah, no, they probably saw right away. They're like, yeah, these people, it's definitely their first time.
Yeah. They, I think they made sure that we were roommates because we didn't know each other before. Just because a lot of people coming from some tropical location, it can be hard to be in Boston for the first time, especially through winter. So they wanted us to kind of come together. I also ended up really good friends with a lot of people from Miami. So that was a kind of similar sort of setup, which made it really easy. And then we got to go and visit Miami during the winter, and then of course visit Hawaii. So not the worst situation.
This is probably two of the best locations you can go to.
Oh yeah.
So you made it all the way up to Boston. You went to Babson, then you studied finance, right?
Yes. So yeah, background was finance and entrepreneurship. Ended up at London School of Economics for my junior year. Took classes like econometrics and was diehard from the financial side since day one. Actually, growing up, I think it was like my 13th or 14th birthday, I asked my parents for money, or anyone who was giving me any presents for my birthday. I was asking them for money so that I can invest in stocks. And of course, whatever I put money into, I completely lost it. I had no idea what I was doing back then, of course.
Oh yeah, when you're young, you just like put into whatever's the biggest name. Like you don't really know what's going on, but.
And back then, Reddit wasn't really available, right? So
yeah,
I don't know.
Wall Street
couldn't buy all the GameStop, the meme stocks, and follow that along. But there was similar sort of situations happening where people would send out mailers, and they were trying to get enough people to kind of like push up a stock or join on the bandwagon, but it didn't have the same breadth as something like Reddit. So you definitely bought like a bunch of GameStop, right, and made out big on it?
I did not. I had my days of stocks like a few years ago, and now I cessate out of all that. I just have Apple sitting away, and that's it.
There you go. Some tried and true.
Yeah, but I'm guessing you kind of went to finance because of that love for stocks, but also probably that was what you knew, right?
Yeah. I think the math side was always really interesting to me. I certainly enjoyed it. my mom was actually an accountant and ended up being a CFO of a company. And so I think there's a lot of just talk around it. And then growing up, parents kind of got us interested in the stock market, and you kind of sit there and you start to realize, hey, you can make numbers become bigger numbers just through sitting there and clicking a few buttons. And so that certainly got fascinating, or became fascinating to me. And there was a ton to learn just from that experience. So that's what really drove that yearning towards finance. And then you kind of just get caught up into it. Back then, it was really, everyone wanted to be an investment banker or work at a big bank if you went to some like business school of some sort. And so really kind of fell into that exact same track.
Yeah, I feel like that's what you hear about. But it's good you had a strong base, getting pushed into a pretty strong industry. But I guess you worked in it for a few years, and then you figured out it wasn't really your thing, right?
Yeah, so I worked in it for about 4 to 5 years. I was over at Goldman Sachs, and it was great. The people there were awesome. The things that I got to do were really an amazing opportunity. Before I left, I actually helped out start a new group over there where we managed money on discretion, which is basically kind of specifically for foundations and endowments. So these foundations or endowments would just kind of give us the keys, and we would handle these multi-asset class portfolios, and we could do all the trading, and then we kind of just tell them what we did. We, of course, had to stay within certain parameters, but it was a really neat opportunity. And that grew. Before I left, we were about managing $5 billion. And so I was in charge of trading some of the stocks that we had. And so in a day, I might trade like $500 million. And so it was fascinating because we would use these algorithms to do it to make sure that we wouldn't move the market. But even in like a big ETF with $500 million, all of a sudden you can actually see your trades changing it, which was really neat and a little scary. And you start to get really used to like trading $500 million. And it doesn't actually seem that much once you're sitting there every single day. But yeah, I got to a point where it kind of felt like we were doing the same thing over and over again. And it got me thinking, kind of, even though we were creating new financial products, we were creating a new like group within a large organization, it didn't feel like we were doing anything new, right? And so like finance has really been around since the beginning of like humankind in one way or another. And the instruments that we use today have been around also for at least decades, if not longer. And a lot of what you're doing is you're just creating new products, which are vehicles of products that have been done in the past. And so I started looking around in terms of kind of opportunities that were out there and some ideas that were floating around with some of friends and I was really intrigued on the tech side, just from the standpoint of software's hasn't really been around that long. And the limits that are associated with it are pretty much limited based off of what's in your own head, right? And so you can kind of go and try to figure out a way to build something, but really that creativity is limited by the individual who's building it. And so that was really intriguing to me. And it seems like there's a lot of opportunity in that space compared to being in finance. And so like that's been kind of hard, is seeing there's a ton of great fintech companies out there. But if you look at the basics, right, they're all doing the exact same thing that's been kind of done in the past. They're just changing maybe the user interface or the experience slightly, but the mechanisms are all the same from a financial situation.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's a lot of API calls and just wrapping up in some like modern UI. But
an example like Robinhood, right? Like everyone who knows Robinhood now, what they're doing from a financial standpoint, nothing different. Right? You've had Charles Schwab, you've had Fidelity, you've had everyone else that had that same ability, and they've been doing it for well over a decade. What they did though with Robinhood is they made it really easy to use compared to some of the other systems that were out there. But it's still buying and selling or trading stocks and having some account that goes through some clearinghouse, and that's it. They just made it look and feel really good for the end consumer.
Yeah, it's an important thing for anyone that's a developer, designer, or product manager. Like if you build a product that makes someone feel something, it's going to have some sort of success. But whether it's a negative feeling or a positive feeling is a big difference, but it's going to be in the news somehow.
Right. Yeah, and that standard has really started to, is really pushed out there. And like that expectation is really high. If you're putting any consumer product out now, it has to be there, right? On the enterprise side, it's not necessarily at that place yet. It's getting there. There's a lot more enterprise products that are actually focusing on how to make a really enjoyable user experience. But any viewpoint from the consumer and their attention span, right, is super short. So you have to make something that catches on and makes it really easy for them to get what they need and what they want really fast.
Exactly. So when you became like a kind of enamored with tech, was it bootcamp first or startup first, or was it at the same time?
Yeah, so we did the startup. I think back then I was pretty naive. Going to Babson, right, which is very much an entrepreneurial school. You kind of start your own company there. You get a lot of that background. I took a lot of what was that?
Strong network effects, like with everyone.
Yeah, definitely network effect. We called it kind of like the Babson itch. And so at some point, everyone from Babson has some like yearning to either join a startup or create their own company. And if not, like it's kind of not the norm, I guess I would say, people coming from Babson. And so we went and actually approached building out this product, and it seemed relatively straightforward to us. And we were kind of wondering why this wasn't already available.
Mm-hmm.
And there's definitely a few areas that we didn't spend the time on to truly understand what it meant and what it provided from a product perspective. It simply came about thinking, why can't I just look at a product in an image, either on the street or in, say, like on some website, and get a better understanding of what that product is, and actually save it, share it, or even buy it. So it's actually a lot of what you see now on Instagram, where you can do that Instagram shopping. That's what we're doing probably about like 8 years ago now.
So these are physical products, right? Not like a website, for example.
So we were making it so that you could view, save, share, and purchase products through images that were digital images. And so we specifically started with digital magazines. So you're talking about things like Popular Science, Shape Magazine, Men's Fitness, GQ, any of those. And you're reading them back then, you'd read them on your iPad. And if you saw like a pair of shoes or a jacket or anything that you really liked, you could click on it, get a bunch of information, and just purchase that product directly from it. So in the same way on Instagram now, these little bubbles pop up. You can click on it, it gives you information about the product, and you can purchase it. We were doing that with digital magazines. And so that was a great experience. We had funding, we had a whole team. I was the only non-technical person at the entire company. And that was actually, I think, a really rough circumstance to be in, especially coming from finance and my whole background. Yeah. Have you had a similar circumstance?
Yeah, no, my last startup also, I was the only person that couldn't code, and I was like, all right, like, I need to understand what these people are talking about.
Right. And how did you end up in that space or in that circumstance?
You mean founding or just being the non-technical person?
Like being the non-technical person coming in there, how did you like approach going into that company, and what were your thoughts before arriving versus kind of once you realized like the need for that technical background and that change after? Yeah,
well, I thought, coding is kind of straightforward. I thought it was a little bit easier than it actually was. So like, I know initially I walked in, I was like, all right, like we're going to build this in this amount of time. It's going to have all these features, and like, let's go boom, boom, boom. And then like slowly deadlines start getting missed. And I'm like, what's going on? They're like, hey, like you realize like, this isn't an MVP. You gotta slim this down. If you want all this is going to take at least 6 months. Yeah. And it's amazing how much that, pretty similar. Luckily, I had a great co-founder, and I just kind of trusted him wholeheartedly. And that helped kind of give some understanding of how to approach these things. But it was like, when I came in at Goldman, our analyst class, about half of the individuals had a finance background. The other half did not. And I noticed that a lot of the individuals that had that finance background were able to excel a lot faster than the ones that did not. And so once kind of going into the tech realm, I felt completely out of water. I had no idea what they were talking about. And I didn't know how long something would take, and someone could kind of tell me whatever they wanted to, and I would just have to take that as is.
And I would always kind of go to my co-founder and be like, is this right? Is this not right? To kind of fact check and make sure that we're all on the same page. And that was like, it's a really tough position to be in if you're helping drive, say, a product or a company.
Yeah.
And so after that, I realized like, if I want to stay in tech, I really need to have this background. And that's really kind of the big part too, is if you want to be in tech, anywhere working close to engineers, it's good to have that experience, even if you're not an engineer. So if you want to be a product manager, even if you're a designer, you should have some background and understanding of how these technical products start to come together. And I certainly wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today without going through a boot camp.
Yeah, like you can't work in products or with products without knowing how they're being built. So
Exactly.
just like if you understand the engineering side as a designer, you know, hey, like if I try to add this really cool animation, like that's going to add a week of development time, for example. So maybe we don't put on this iteration. And then the other side also. So if you're a designer, I mean, if you're a developer, you should understand what the designer is going through to actually build up the interface. So it's good to, you know, be well-rounded. And is that like the main focus that you went to bootcamp for, just to get that well-roundedness?
Yeah, so I think it really drove from the same premise that I had in the financial kind of field, is like, if you're working in finance, you're creating financial products, like you've got to have the background of like your financial understanding. When it comes though to like in the technical products, same sort of thing. Like you should know the fundamentals. And if you can sit there and you can just go and like, even if you're not writing the code, like it really makes a really big difference in terms of how you approach the product, how you look at what can and cannot be done, and like how like the speed at which you can get something out. And especially for a product manager, that's huge, right? Because you're making trade-offs left and right of how do I get the most value out in the least period of time. And if you already can come to the table and you've thought through some of those give and takes, and you know what is kind of a realm of possibility, that's going to make the conversation a lot easier, a lot faster, and you're going to save yourself a lot of time later on. And without going through and doing that boot camp, you wouldn't know that, right? You can sit there and do like a CS 101 and get some sense of like databases and kind of structures and what APIs are, but if you haven't sat there and actually like done some of the work yourself, you're going to be missing out on a big portion of it.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. Is like with the overviews, like you could read stuff, but until you actually get into the weeds and like actually try stuff out, it's not going to stick.
Right.
So did you end up like using? Well, actually, first to kind of backtrack with the boot camp, like how was that balancing it? You know, doing the program while building a company.
So we actually ended up shutting down the company, and that then drove me to think about what I wanted to do next. And so we had the company for about 18 months, I think is what was live. We missed, there's one area that we definitely missed when we were trying to determine like, is this a product or is this a company worth building? And it was specifically with the area that we went after, which was digital magazines, based off of the subscriber numbers that they actually have versus how many people actually read those magazines. It was far less. So you're talking, we expected somewhere around like 20 million monthly active readers. When we actually started getting the numbers, when we launched everything, it was like 20,000, right? Very big difference. And like the world and trends. Oh my gosh. Yeah. We thought something was wrong with our system because we were only taking in data for when they would click on like a product and use our system. And so we're like, wow, we really built something that no one likes. And then we all of a sudden started looking at the data for the next round of magazines that went out and seeing how many people actually hit the page. And we're like, wait a second, our numbers are actually really good, but the overarching numbers for reading these magazines is really low. And then of course the trends at that time, less and less people are doing digital magazines, more people are doing blogs, but even so more people are going to things like Instagram or Facebook. And that's starting to drive a lot of where people are going and kind of consuming whatever information that they have. And so we started to realize like going forward, this doesn't make sense. We were about to do like a Series A and we cut it out, sold off some of the tech, gave money back to investors and realized that we wanted to kind of move on from that. And so I knew I wanted to stay in tech. I didn't want to go back into finance. And so with that same kind of premise, I'm like, I have to learn how to code. I know I'm not going to be an engineer, but I really want to go to a really difficult boot camp and become as close to being a full-time engineer as possible through it.
Gotcha. So it was after the startup that
Yes.
you went to boot camp. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So before we go into that, one thing I want to harp on is what you mentioned is, do we have a product or a company? Because that's a huge thing with startups or any sort of product is, hey, is this have like a roadmap and can go into other directions, or is this just like some sort of product that Facebook can launch stories and that's it?
Right. Just like a feature. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So good to mention that. So okay, so you go into the boot camp. You chose Hack Reactor. Any specific reason you chose that one?
Yeah, so I was doing a bunch of research trying to figure out where I wanted to go. Of course, I wanted to go to like what was kind of deemed as like the hardest one, the one that will get you the furthest, the fastest.
Yeah.
And Hack Reactor just kept popping up. It was kind of deemed as you have to do a technical interview to get in. So I had to do work ahead of time to learn JavaScript. Once you get through that technical interview and you get allocated into it, it's 3 months, 6 days a week, 11 hours a day. And that one day off, you have homework, right? So essentially it's 7 days a week for 3 months straight.
You're probably used to that schedule after founding a company.
Yeah. It was interesting though. I started just like dreaming in code and I was like, wow, this is wild.
You start dreaming of the solutions in your sleep and then you wake up and you code it out.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was great. Actually, I met a lot of really good friends through it. But the big thing that they kind of called out is there's other coding boot camps like General Assembly, where they say it kind of takes you from like 0 to 20 or 0 to 30.
Mm-hmm.
Hack Reactor was supposed to be a little bit more from like 30 to 100, or at least 30 to 90.
Yeah.
You're supposed to come out in a much better situation where you can kind of go and build whatever you wanted. And it was actually great afterwards, even though I didn't end up in an engineering position. I would still go and like, I built like a smart door, I built iOS apps, and I just kind of kept coding for fun, which was great. But yeah, Hack Reactor really like set everything up to be a really solid foundation in terms of understanding what's needed. And then the big thing too is they taught you how to learn. Like they knew that they weren't going to teach you anything and everything like in those 3 months, but they wanted to give you the tool set so that you could go and actually like learn some of that yourself.
Yeah, boot camps, like they're not going to teach you everything ever. There's too much to go into, especially unless you choose like a specialization. But yeah, the biggest thing I always hear is they teach you how to learn and how to learn in a quick way. So that's what's important in tech, because every single day there's something new. You got to always keep up.
Never ends. That's kind of the exciting part, right?
Yeah,
I don't know how you. Yeah. How did you find it in terms of kind of staying up to date with new things that are coming out and like the fact that it's like the tech's changing constantly?
Yeah, well, that's the biggest thing. Like, so like I didn't work in finance, but I worked at American Express, and they have kind of the set way they want to do things, and that got boring real quick. But the thing that kept me interested was, learning about tech. I was learning data science stuff all the time, applying that, and that's how I kept myself really interested. And that's kind of what I've been doing, with startups now. So
that's awesome.
Yeah,
and like on the data science side too, right? There's always new ways to approach it, and there's a lot of new tools that keep coming out. And so, like, I don't know, that's the part that I love, right? On the finance side, it was kind of just felt like, even if they're new products, it just wasn't new, right? Yeah. And then now you're like looking at this, you're like, oh my gosh, there's like a whole new language, or even like we were learning React at the time, and even within React now, there's like a bunch of different, languages that you can go and you can leverage, and it's like evolved, and it's been 5 years, and it's evolved a ton.
Yeah, you're getting on the early side, but yeah, like all these packages always updating and everything. It's crazy, but it's exciting.
Yeah, it is.
So my next question, I'll combine Chu George's question also. So he asked, Ryan, would you recommend people to start a company if they want to become a product manager? So I was going to ask, like, do you think this is the route? So starting a company is the best thing to prepare yourself, or do you think something like a boot camp in either engineering or design could be a better thing to prep?
Yeah, so I definitely wouldn't recommend just starting a company in order to be a product manager. Like starting a company
I
is
think you're so
absolutely
focused.
it's absolutely a pain. It's a really tough situation, yeah, as Rod, as you know. So yeah, if the goal is to become a product manager, I think as Rod, as you were saying, there's a bunch of other options in terms of getting there. Uh, Building a company really should come from you have found a great opportunity, you have validated that there's a problem that needs to be solved, you think you have some way of differentiating your product that's out there, and then of course I think as what we were talking about earlier, right, there's ability to turn it into an actual business. At the startup previously, so the company was named Pixbi, I was essentially acting as a product manager without knowing how to be a product manager. Yeah. Later on, I luckily got some really great training, which was awesome and opened up my eyes. But I think to Rod's point, if you're looking to become a product manager, those other avenues are potentially, if you already are a designer, even if you are an engineer, there's a lot of engineers that become PMs. There's people like that take a product marketing position. And that's also an example of people that start to come in. And then depending on kind of where you are in your career, there's now a ton of product manager that are like, I guess, associate product managers.
Yeah.
Either at some of the larger companies, they'll have those sort of positions that you can come in and do rotations. And that's a lot. Yeah. So there's a lot of other ways to go and actually jump into it.
Yeah. One thing I'll add on that is, don't found a whole company. Obviously, like Ryan said, that's a lot of work. But what you could do is build a mini product that solves some sort of pain. It doesn't have to be, world-changing startup, because obviously those ideas are a dime a dozen. But also build it with a team of designers and developers, and be the product manager, like the de facto product manager, see how things work, see where things kind of break in terms of communication. And that'll give you a bunch of experience that if you go to a product manager interview, you could talk about.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember at Hack Reactor, we actually had that opportunity, right? You kind of have a team, you're working together to go and put out a product, and one person gets to kind of act as the de facto product manager. And that's always a great way to do it. But yeah. And especially if you have friends who, like, if you're already out of boot camp, you have the people that you went to boot camp with, or you have all the alums, right? There's going to be side projects that you get to work together, as Rod was saying. Like, you can put that together and get a lot of that experience and try things out that way. And it's kind of fun because then you don't have all that overhead and thinking about hiring and funding and trying to support an entire company. And if your goal is just to make a product with some friends, right, you can have fun with that and see what you can do to get it out, right? And I have a lot of friends who are engineers that they'll create some project with a bunch of others, and they're not looking to necessarily make money off of it on day one. And the goal is just to get as many people using it as possible.
Yeah, that's the much more stress-free route. So definitely recommend that. So coming out of the startup, then you did the boot camp, and then you went into your first product manager role. So
yes,
like I guess you kind of mentioned, but you were aiming to go into product management specifically during the boot camp already.
Yes. So I think it was another one of those, trying to figure out where do I fit within this kind of tech realm.
Yeah.
And while I was doing the engineering work, I kind of realized like I could come out and be a not that great engineer. I certainly wasn't the strongest in my class. And it was going to take me, I knew it would take me probably years to get to the point where I felt like I was a really strong engineer. And so like one of my good friends who was in the same cohort as I was at Hack Reactor, he's now at, say, like TaskRabbit, and he's one of the senior engineers, but it took him the span of years to really get there. And thinking about where my skill set.
So sorry to interrupt, but yeah, like kind of recognizing like where you're at with your skill, and then seeing if your previous experience can kind of tie into going to different careers. So I think that's smart that you realize that right away. Like product management would probably be the better route right off the bat. But similarly, like for someone that might do engineering and then they come from a sales or marketing background, they can go into tech sales and kill it right away.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's exactly where kind of my mindset was. It was talking to as many people as possible, trying to figure out where those skill sets were and the skill sets that I had previously, and bringing those in and where that fit. And I really loved how product management sat at that intersection between like business, which was my background, design, which I had a lot to learn, and then engineering, which I managed to get at least some of it from. And a lot of that too is like stakeholder management, and you work with sales and marketing and all these different groups, which same sort of thing my background was really helpful in. Yeah, and being a founder, right? You're kind of like trying to go through and feel through in the dark when you are a founder. And so there's a lot of learnings that came from that was really helpful as a product manager.
Yeah, I always think of a product manager as like an internal founder. So like, what would you say is like the biggest difference between a product manager and an actual founder? You know, other than obviously like the whole legal and taxes and
yeah, I was going to say like the actual creation of the business and having that around you is probably that's really rough, right? So as a PM at a company, depending on the size of the company, you don't have to worry and think about all these different disciplines, hiring and financing and dealing with all of that. You get to focus on the product and with the product team. I think that's a big one. It is interesting though, you do see a lot of product managers either end up running companies or of course driving out new companies from the ground up because of that experience in all those different disciplines. Mm-hmm. But it is definitely a much easier process to just be a PM within a larger company instead of trying to start an entire company yourself, because you start to get pulled away, right? It starts to become that question. I've had a few friends where they're really strong PMs and say they start a company. They have to start making that decision on, are they going to find other people like a COO or CEO to start taking on all that work so that they can stay close to the product? Mm-hmm. Or are they do they let go of the product? And you actually see a lot of companies struggle in this situation where someone wants to kind of be in that CEO position, but they're the ones that were acting as the PM for the product and they can't let go of the product. And so they hire a bunch of PMs. The PMs then get kind of undermined by the CEO or someone else, and they don't actually get control. And so it's a really difficult situation if you're sitting there and you're a really strong PM and you have to give up all control to your PMs to actually enable them to do the work that they're hired to do.
So like, I guess what you're mentioning, like it goes kind of like the opposite of what George was asking. He was asking, should I found a company to be a product manager? But in the same way, like if you have interest in starting a startup in the future, being a product manager in a company where, you know, you actually have funding and things are kind of more built, that's a good way to wet your feet.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also to what we were just talking about, if you want to be a PM by starting a company, high chances if you actually want to run that company, you will no longer be a PM.
Exactly. So you go into your first product manager job. Like how was the job search process and like interview process?
It was definitely interesting. So I came in without having a PM background, and I didn't know exactly what it meant to be a PM. I just knew that seemed like a skill set in an area that, I had the idea of it. I talked to a lot of PMs and I think I know what this entails, but I never had that actual experience. And so I talked to a bunch of different companies. I think having the startup background was helpful. And then kind of my background at Goldman was also helpful. But what I was specifically looking for, and I think this is like anyone coming out of college or anyone coming out of boot camp really should be looking for the same thing, is where can I go to learn as much as possible, right? And I was really worried about joining a company and being thrown in as hey, you're a PM now, good luck, go do your thing. I really wanted to be somewhere where it was going to be a good mentorship program, a good education program, a place where I could go and I could try a lot of things and learn really quickly and iterate on kind of the process of me being a PM. And that's what drove kind of my decision of where to go and where to look. And I ultimately ended up at a company that was called Pivotal Labs. And they've been around for a long time. And they are there to kind of help others understand and train them on how to determine value and how to build value quickly. And the thing that's different about them is that the companies actually come to our offices to learn from us instead of us going to their offices. And we actually sit there and our PMs teach PMs how to be product managers. Our engineers pair program with their engineers. Our designers pair design with their designers. So we're not an outsourcing firm or anything like that. And we charged a lot of money. So if they were looking for outsourcing, we're like, if you can go to someone far cheaper, like we're going to teach and up level all of your like product team. And so I thought, if I am teaching other PMs how to be great PMs, then hopefully that would make me a really good PM, because otherwise that would kind of defeat the entire purpose. And so that really was a great situation to be in.
Yeah, teaching someone else is one of the best ways to learn. I think, like, I think people that come in at boot camps, like, you should try to start teaching people right away. Like, obviously, put the caveat, like, hey, I don't really know the most yet, but just try teaching it, and it makes you understand concepts in a different way. Yes. But a good choice on going to the teachers if you want to learn, though. That's a good choice to your first job.
Yeah, it was nice because in order for me to teach other product managers how to be great product managers, I had to get a decent amount of training first. And they luckily had a lot of really strong product managers. I think we actually had 17 of us in the exact same office. And then we had kind of like the head of product management, and it was more of like practices and process, and went through like a whole 6-week like training course. And then I paired with other like really strong product managers along with the client product managers for a while until I could actually go off on my own. So it was just like constant training and constant learning, which was huge. And the same sort of thing, if you come out as a boot camp as an engineer, you don't know, like there's still a lot to learn. And the same sort of thing, if you can get set up in an environment where you have a mentor or you're pair programming with others, it's a great way to learn. Like the worst scenario you can go in is like, here you go, engineer, go sit in this corner, or like close the door. We won't talk to you, and like do these features, right? You're never like, it's going to be really difficult to learn quickly on your own and by yourself. And that's one of the reasons why you go to boot camp, right? It's others who know and have that experience are there to teach you and kind of help guide you. You want to like continue that after the boot camp.
For sure. And that's one thing that I think, like, some boot camp grads, they may come out and say, hey, like, I just want any job. But often I always say to kind of avoid the smaller companies, like especially like early startups, because they're going to say, hey, start churning out code, doing this right away, maybe not as much guidance. And their expectations like from a management team is going to be in an area that like you can't deliver. And it's not your fault, you know, you're just coming out, but like, and they have some sort of elevated expectation. Yeah. But if you're put under that situation early in your career, it can be devastating. So like you said, like vet the company, make sure you're going into a learning environment.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because a lot of times the smaller companies, they may look at a lot of the engineers the same in their expectations. Yeah. Whereas if you go to those larger companies, they're definitely going to have different hierarchies of engineers, and like you're coming right out, they're going to know that you're very different than someone who's been like an engineer for 5 or 10 years. And like, they're going to make sure that you're set up hopefully for success.
My friend actually graduated design boot camp recently, and he's like, yeah, the startup asked me to be the design manager. I'm like, run away. I'm like, if they're asking a boot camp grad to be the design manager, they have no idea like what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really a big part of just coming out of those boot camps. And as much as you want to find like something as fast as possible, make sure that you're getting paid. If you can take that extra time to really make sure you're in a good position, and even during that interview, right? That's something that you should, it's just as much them interviewing you as you are interviewing them. And so you should be asking those questions up front, right? What's that mentorship like? What's the teaching like? What are your expectations of me being at the level that I'm at? And all of that are really things that you want to assess when you're going in and finding the company to join.
Yeah. So what do you look for? Because now you're a manager of product managers, right?
Yes. So I've trained probably like 25 managers or product managers before, worked with a bunch of managers of product managers. And then I've managed, I guess, one of my recent products. We had a product team of over 100 people. So a bunch of product managers, designers, engineers. Yeah, we were building like a pretty big system.
That's a lot of personality. Like, I know like product managers, you balance personalities a lot. Like 100 people, what do you even do?
We were building a really big product that's used by large enterprises. So it had to do with like our Kubernetes offering. So it's actually now the flagship Kubernetes offering for VMware.
Okay.
And so, yeah, we had to build something really fast. So we needed a pretty big team. And so we sectioned out each of the teams, and each of those teams had a separate product manager and then a series of engineers, and some had designers, some didn't. But we had to coordinate in terms of like the different specialties of those. There was like a bunch of basically sub products within that one major product that we drove out, which was really exciting and really fun. But we had to essentially within like 6 months get a major product out. So it was really fast.
Yeah, that's crazy. So how do you recommend, teams to communicate? Like obviously you have to talk to people, but like what are kind of like secrets, especially when you have a big team like that? You have to have some sort of secret sauce you're using.
Yeah, so this was interesting. So at like Pivotal, one of the things that we would do is we taught product teams how to work really efficiently, but that was basically just like one product team. And then in our R&D realm, which is where I transitioned into, we actually had like 60 different product teams building one product. And so we started to do that at scale. And so how does this all work together? We actually were the largest extreme programming company, I think, in the world at the time. And extreme programming. Yeah, and so extreme programming is a lot of what you do in these boot camps, where you're like pair programming with each other, and then the speed of like you do a lot of test-driven development. That'd be up front, and so there's a lot of different areas that you would try to speed up the entire process with. And so there's I think it's Kent Beck is the writer and kind of like creator of extreme programming, and so there's a few really good books out there. There's always a give and take in terms of process and practices, depending on what you're doing. And so there were some good sides and some bad sides of it. It was 100% pair programming every single day versus kind of like picking and choosing when that happens. But yeah, so that kind of pair programming and rotations was actually helpful to get like information across teams because people would move across those teams. But then what we would do is we made sure that we had like a very clean process of writing out what we called like feature narratives, or I think at Amazon they'll call them like product narratives. And that was a means to make sure it was very clear of what we were trying to accomplish, why we're trying to accomplish it. We would bring in kind of that balanced team concept of having designers and engineers and product managers working from the beginning. And like in a product like what we were building, we'd have to have like security and legal and others kind of involved. And so you have all these different practices all working together from the beginning so that it's not kind of that waterfall situation where all of a sudden you have some idea and then you throw it to another team and they kind of like blow up because they have no idea why you're doing what you're doing. And that was a really great way to make sure that that information was then flowing across other teams. So every other team knew what was happening. And how we could like all work together on that same direction that was going. And so like I would help set kind of like that broad direction and then work with each of the product managers in each of their teams to figure out how we can make sure everything converges.
What would you recommend to engineers and designers to make their PM's life easier? Like what do you look for from your team members?
Ooh. Yeah, there's a lot of things. And I think what's interesting is depending on the company that you are at, what being a PM means can definitely change and differ. And so I really I have a very specific viewpoint of like what I think PM should be. And that is definitely not like project managers, and that should not be like engineering managers. But in kind of the like lean product development sort of viewpoint of what a product manager is, I think the biggest thing that an engineer can do is, you were saying this actually earlier on, right, is have some understanding of the process that product managers go through. What are the things that are most important to them? Same sort of thing when it comes to design. And so I actually see the strongest engineers as those that can go and essentially give back and give more insight to the PMs or to the designers while they're building the product. Because sometimes people don't realize this. The people who are actually using the product most are the engineers, right? Mm-hmm. They're the ones that are going through and testing out the flows or testing out the logic of how something works. And you're going to be the very first one to see if something doesn't feel right. And so instead of just sitting there and just writing out whatever feature and being like, this feature is done, really think about from the user's experience, what is it that we're trying to accomplish? how does this work in terms of that user interface and user experience? And then also another really great thing when engineers come to us is if there's a much simpler way to accomplish that same outcome for the user, that's going to be a lot faster. Like we want to hear it, right? That's always what we're looking for is how do we get as much value out as fast as possible? And if an engineer goes, hey, actually, the way that you all were thinking about it, I think we can get the exact same outcome, but we can do it in half the time by doing X, Y, and Z. That's huge. And so we really want engineers to be thinking from that customer and product perspective and really working as a whole team.
Yeah, because a PM, I can't think of everything. A designer can't think of everything, and engineer can't think of everything. So you need those perspectives. And then also like what you mentioned, like kind of thinking with like product thinking. I think for anybody that wants to get into product management, start doing it before you're in product management. When you're working in those sprints, start showing, hey, I think about it through a PM's perspective, and then that could you can leverage that into a PM role internally in the company, or as mentioned in interviews in the future.
Yeah, and another great opportunity, believe it or not, PMs at times will take breaks and they'll take vacations. And that could be another great opportunity to say, I'll take over the backlog for 2 weeks or whatever it may be. And we've done that a lot where there's an engineer that's interested in being a PM and we'll kind of coach them up right before heading out. And like 2 weeks maybe hopefully isn't enough time to really blow up everything. So it's like an ample period of time though for you to get some sense of it and then give you like a little bit of that risk that you can try it out. So like if you see that opportunity where like a PM is heading out on vacation, like, and you're interested, raise your hand and ask if you can PM for those 2 weeks.
Yeah, no, the fires won't have too long to spread. I think that's a great opportunity. It sounds like you're doing some good stuff for future PMs.
Yeah.
So looking back at what you thought a product needed coming out of bootcamp versus now, like what? I know the view is probably way different, but what's like the main thing that's different?
I think it goes back to some of the areas that you were talking about before. When it comes to a product, like you have to figure out like what is the actual problem that you're solving. I think as an engineer, you love building things. It's really fun to build something. It's not that like exciting to sit there and validate or to hear that what you're building doesn't make any sense. But as a PM or like if you're in the design side, like you are ruthless in terms of like trying to figure out why what you're doing is wrong. And if like fighting like that over and over again, and you keep hearing that your product's actually useful or you're really solving a problem, like that's great. Like you're always trying to prove yourself wrong over and over again. And that's the part that I think I didn't have any real experience in, especially before or during or after that, or right after that boot camp. It was really once I joined Pivotal and started to learn how to build products and how to coach others on determining value. That's when it really came into play.
No, great point. Yeah, don't just build to solve problems.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should do it.
Oh, perfect. All right, so we're getting close to the top of the hour. I always like to close it out with a couple questions. So one, if you're graduating from a boot camp today, what's your plan to land a job quickly?
Yeah, no, that's I think that's what everyone's kind of looking for, right? As fast as possible. If you haven't been making any income and you're trying to land that first job, and I know some people that went from making say 30K to all of a sudden 120K, right? It's a really enticing space to be in. Yeah, absolutely. I think the big ones are definitely is really networking. It comes down to that. So you should start networking as soon as possible. Don't wait till the end to do that. Start trying to figure out where, like what areas interest you. And that will really help with the networking and where to focus. But if you're just sitting there sending resumes to just anything that moves, it's going to make it really difficult, right? There's a lot of competition that's out there, especially from people coming from boot camp. So, and what we were talking about earlier, right? If you have a background in that space, that's going to help a lot. And it's similar to what we were talking about as well. Like as a PM, if you have some like experience or understanding or some empathy for that end customer, that's big, right? So like if you were working in, like you're selling cars,
Mm-hmm.
and then you decide to become a software engineer, like it may be interesting to go work at a car sales tech company of some sort,
There you go.
because you have that experience of being the salesperson. That's one of their customers that's associated with it. You can empathize with that user. That'll be a much easier way to get in the door and talk about that experience. And that's sort of the person that they're looking for. So I'd focus on those companies, as well as if you potentially even have some contacts that are through that to then get you in there, because recommendations or referrals make a huge difference. That's how I ended up at Pivotal, was through that. And I consistently refer people, and that tends to be the best way to get in. So as hard as it is, there, believe it or not, there's like usually someone who knows someone, and you got to lean on that, and you can't be afraid to ask for it. Like everyone knows and has been in that position before. So when anyone reaches out to me, like I'm always happy to talk and give some guidance and help out. And if it's a good situation, like make that referral, right? People want to help. So just don't be afraid to ask.
Exactly. Network. Don't be afraid to ask. And then also, like you mentioned, leverage your superpower as a bootcamp grad. You're coming from usually another industry, another degree, and you have a unique perspective. So, try to highlight that, narrow in your focus on job searching. I think that's a good idea.
Absolutely.
And then last question. So what should every bootcamp grad be doing in the first year of their career?
Yeah. So I think this is what we were talking about as well, right? It's find that mentor, find that position where you can go and you can be taught. You have some teacher that's there, or some others that you can leverage. Coming out of the bootcamp, you're still going to be really green. There's going to be a lot that you need to learn. And you really want to make sure that you're in that position to continue with that learning and up level yourself as much as possible. Don't put yourself into that startup where you're just a feature factory, right? Yeah. You're just going to have a miserable time, and it's not going to set you up for success for later, right? The more you can learn in that first year, that's going to make all the difference of becoming that senior engineer or whatever you want to jump off to right after that.
Well, there you have it, everyone. So thank you, Ryan, so much for sharing all of your knowledge.
Thank you, Ryan.
Everyone, if you liked it, leave a like on the video, share it. But otherwise, before we let you go, Ryan, is there anything you want to plug, anything that you're working on, or social, people could connect with you?
Yeah. So yeah, on LinkedIn, I'm just Ryan J. Jones 10. Super simple. I've been working at VMware. I actually have my last day here on March 5th. Going to be doing now second startup, which is exciting. My technical co-founder is actually someone who was in my Hack Reactor class, so the same group as me, which is fun. So it all kind of comes around. But yeah, so yeah, continue that network. Stay friends with everyone who was in your cohort, and leverage the alumni as well, which is great. But yeah, so if you have any questions, if there's anything I can help with, let me know. Happy to talk in more detail. Also have a bunch of things written on Medium around kind of product management and how to go and approach products. But yeah, if anyone has questions, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn.
I'm definitely hitting you up about that startup. I want to hear what it's about.
Yeah, it's definitely a very different place than what I've been. Like I've been in server infrastructure tech, and we're doing something actually in cannabis.
All right, I know. We'll talk about it. But yeah, so thanks again, Ryan. Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks everyone for listening. And until next time on Booting Up.
Great.